Recording is on.
Hello everyone, today is Sunday the 29th of May 2022 and this is meeting 111. This is an open discussion, so we have no real topic for today, so I'm just reading their exhausting week. Yeah, I'm very tired too, so we're not very inspired. We're all a bit like that, our lives are like that, but we can still get together and see if there's things that we can share today. Last week we had a very interesting talk about the healthcare industry and the whole situation of medicine, and Gary was talking about Ivan Illich. There's a lot of reading and a lot of some recordings on this guy and also on the whole subject of medicine, so maybe we could revisit that another time when we've each of us looked at it a bit in depth, and maybe we can start on I don't know what you suggest, or what's coming up from the Reddit this week that we could expand on.
Yeah, I just was just having a quick look at my notes there, and I noticed that Tom put up a post on Reddit about Evola. What's his first name? I've forgotten. And he got a little bit of pushback in the comments about that.
Julius Evola. Julius Evola.
Sorry.
Julius.
Yes, right. Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, I because there was a question about whether Hugh had spoken about this fellow, and I have a feeling that he must have, but I can't specifically remember what he said. I'm just wondering if anybody else went into that a little bit, if we can develop that a bit more. I didn't follow it up in any detail, but if there's somebody else who followed it up, we could just spend a few minutes on that. I don't know.
I looked at Evola and I knew about him a bit before, because my mother was friend with some Italians who worshipped him for some reason, some really right-wing guys. I had a little bit of a I was a little bit reluctant to look at him when I was young, so I went back and I realized that he was very he was coming, I think, from quite an elite family, and I think he explored some very interesting things. He was fascinated with the occult and the magic and different things. He was also yeah, he had some visions that were very in line. I think he observed things in the right way. It's just when it came to solutions, and that's when I think it started to go a little bit wrong. And also, you know how people are put in a box, and immediately he was, I think, put in the box of the post-fascist sort of clean up after the war and all these sort of things. So, but yeah, his analysis of society is very close to what we talk about. Tom was right. He has he's quite it's quite eclectic. He goes into all sorts of directions. He was very, very much into the occult, very much.
Yeah, I didn't sort of freshen up my memory on the whole thing, but I mean, one thought that just comes to mind is this peculiarity of the right, where they make, for instance, in the discussions about vaccinations and the virus and all that. They seem to make quite a lot of sense pushing back against the authoritarianism. But in the same breath, they come out with that climate denial, and it's terribly difficult to take them on board completely. Yeah, sorry, I'm still trying to get ready so my act isn't together. If somebody else wants to say something.
Oh,
Sophie, you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry for that. When Gary was saying that, I looked at the post on Reddit and I looked at the comments, and I noticed that somebody said that Hugh had mentioned Evola several times and read some of his works. And I, of course, don't remember where and when, so maybe when I'll be reviewing because I'm trying to every week listen to old things to try to put old meetings and put a bit of topics on them so they can tidy things up a bit in the mega thread. I think Mike is doing it too. But it's sometimes a bit difficult to look at Hugh too much. I don't know if you experience the same thing. But anyway, I'd like to find a bit more about what he was thinking of him. It's a very complicated person. It's quite a big body of work. So I don't think I want to spend my time looking too deep into Evola. But the video that was on Reddit was very good at the start, but it ended a little bit. I was not too taken by it. I think I don't want to go too much in too many directions. There's so many people out there, so many interesting people. I think he was a bit death cult eugenist type of person. I would love Tom to have expanded on why he was interested in his work. And did anybody else watch that video called "Revolt Against the Modern World"?
Yeah, I watched it. Yeah, it kind of reminded me a lot of like leftist critique of like capitalism. So guys like Karl Marx and stuff. But the problem with stuff like that is even if the critique is correct, the like people like Lenin or Hitler, they go the authoritarian road of trying to craft this utopia from the top down, and then it just turns into shit where people are othered. There's death camps. There's all that terror, all that terrorism from governments and stuff. So it's like you got to be careful with utopian visions like that because yeah, they turn authoritarian and bad.
Yes, I agree with the dangers of utopia. It's it's a flag that you follow very easily because it's wonderful, it's shiny, and it's what Marxism and religions and all sorts of other writers have, and it's appealing. We all want to write a beautiful story, but I think it's a trap. Yeah, it's a trap. And his utopia was based, I think, on eugenism, on selecting, humans who were worth, who were at the top. He had that theory of the original warrior, and then sort of a degeneration of humans into. So his way of looking at it is not entirely wrong because we did lose a lot of our talents and a lot of our abilities to operate in the world and in respect with nature. But he looked at it from a point of view that was extremely toxic, I think, and that you find in a lot of discourses of the utopian of the extreme right at the moment too.
Totally. I'm reading at the moment a kind of a manifesto or a utopian book about the collapse or the climate crisis. And the problem with that book, I'm gonna write a review at some point, but the main problem is that this person wants to have military help in, you know, taking over the power of the world, of the globe. But as soon as possible, he wants to instate the sustainable leadership, and that reminds me of Marxism and the dictatorship of the proletariat. And I'm all for sustainability, but this guy doesn't even define sustainability. And our big leader, our big female leader in Norway in the 1980s, I think, she had a job writing the UN report for our common future, I think it was called. Gro Harlem Brundtland from Norway. She had that job for the UN, and the first thing she did was basically to pervert the concept of sustainability and sustainable development. So she basically said that, yeah, you know, this sustainability thing, which used to mean this and this, now it just means that we go ahead and pump oil and just go about our daily business, you know, and try to say some nice words about green stuff, and yeah, it's basically total fraud, right? So the last thing I would want to have happen in the last decade of civilized humanity is to have a totally fraudulent revolutionary government, global government, claiming that yeah, but whatever we are doing is sustainable, because you know, if you don't define it, even in your sort of basic revolutionary book, your text, your Das Kapital, your Marxist sort of basic book, if you don't define what is sustainable and what is not sustainable, then obviously your revolution would just be another bogus revolution where you assume power, and then you would just define sustainability to be whatever we do at any given point, right?
Yeah, that's true. And another problem with government control and stuff is with government, you know, comes the invasion of markets and money. And once you got that in place, that determines what your culture is. And if you're trying to have like a normal human culture that's organic, when money and government comes in and commodities and the marketplace, that culture dies. So yeah, that's another difficulty.
On the subject of words there, I was writing something in the comments on the word sustainable. You see, there's lots of words now that are used in the media and the press and sometimes by writers that have a magic property. And if you wave sustainable, you immediately open the door to anything at all. Everybody thinks it's grand. It's like the word green, you know, or there's a list of words like that that are meant to assuage and calm people and make them think that, trust me, you know, trust me, I'm doing the right thing for you, you know, I'm sustainable and green. And there's so many words like that, and they're if you sometimes I find it very difficult to go near the real what you call the media, the news media, the mainstream media. But if you just listen from a distance and you take a few notes of those words, you'd find that they regularly come back. They're always there. They're used constantly to describe the work of the government, the police, religion, and any sort of big industry. What do you think of this? Have you got any other examples?
I
Um,
can't think of. Oh, go ahead, Gary.
uh, Thanks. I was just reminded uh, of when I was listening to the first part of Illich's conversation, and he was, you know, just a minute ago where we were talking about this, you know, military government or whatever, or some kind of authority system taking over to fix things up or declare sustainability or whatever. But Illich was describing the church about around about 1000 AD, just 1100 maybe, around about then. And he was giving the parable of the Good Samaritan, who I suppose everybody knows it, where somebody's injured at the side of the road, and all these people walk past, and nobody helps the person because for various reasons. But at one point, one person does stop to help, and Illich said that the common interpretation of that is probably not correct. I think that what he meant was that the usual interpretation of that is that, well, you should always, be helpful. It's your kind of duty, and all the rest of this kind of thing. And he was saying what he was talking about was the kind of feeling at the time them was that people were very much more identified with their group, their tribes and their villages, that their kind of ethics was connected to their sort of ethnic. So the ethnic, I suppose those two words have probably got the same root anyway, but what was ethical was related to what was their shared ethnic identity. And generally, you probably would tend not to help somebody who was outside of your group just because they are outside. And then he went on to describe how the Good Samaritan who helped, he helped because that was what he felt was the right thing for him to do. In other words, he was behaving independently. He wasn't sort of being dictated to in any way. He was going with what he felt was his personal responsibility. And he, just to try and get back to the point, he went on to describe how the church kind of annexed Good Samaritanness by making doing good a Christian virtue and a kind of a duty to God or whatever. And what they did was they kind of institutionalized so-called moral behavior. And so they removed from people their individual agency to decide for themselves what they wanted to do, and institutionalized it and said that, what is the right thing to do is what we say, and you obey that. You don't obey your own instinct for what you think might be a proper way to act. And just to draw that back is a little bit like these authoritarian arrangements. Now, we're going to fix up society. We're going to ensure that everything is done sustainably and all that. But again, this is this power structure that has taken over the whole discourse and taken over the problem, and effectively prevents people from acting according to their own instinct, and certainly according to the situation at the moment, where a lot of people can see that, for instance, the whole sustainability structure is just a facade. It's a joke. But we can see that we're probably going to get caught in this kind of regime where obeisance to this god of sustainability is going to be more or less compulsory, and you'll be heretical if you try to deviate from it. So yeah, I was just want to say, because it had a kind of a parallel with what Illich was saying, and of course, also of course the Catholic Church was also an emerging power structure in that time that he was talking about 1,000 odd years ago. Just as at the moment we get these emerging power structures jostling to take control of well, in this instance, taking control of sustainable development and greenwashing and all the rest of that. So I'll keep quiet for a minute if anyone wants to comment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good things to be said about Jesus and the Good Samaritan. For instance, that I think then as well as now, 2,000 years later, it's always easier for you as an individual, isn't it, to just look away and go about your own interests instead of helping anyone, because either you'll be put in handcuffs like we saw in America this week, or you'll get into some kind of other trouble because you're trying to do the good thing, right? So I think it's a good thing for Christianity and or for Jesus or whoever wrote the Bible to say that you should do these good deeds, because otherwise people would just not do them, I think. But when it comes to whatever sustainability regime, post-revolutionary regime, I think you should definitely have your skepticism antennas out, because when they don't even want to define what they mean by sustainability, they're talking bullshit. Because as I just wrote in a note on my computer, let's say you have this revolution that this guy wants, right? And the first farmers and bakers make the first 1 million breads to eat after that revolution, right? And you have this whole new ideological economy and all this stuff, and you can't even distribute these breads, and you know but my bottom line is, for the agriculture, is really that no single deed of agriculture has ever been sustainable. Agriculture is basically a non-sustainable practice. It's the first original sin of humanity, basically. So yeah, you can make 1 million breads after the sustainable revolution, the so-called sustainable revolution, but not even that is sustainable if you're going to follow the pre-1980s, pre-Brundtland definition of sustainability, because you are basically taking away from nature, and you are depleting the topsoil. You are, you're messing up the earth, and you are, pushing away the other animals and plants that would otherwise be on that field. So yeah, that's basically my position on that.
Yeah, another thing with the Good Samaritan is that whole situation with the church and trying to tell people not to do these things. That's like trying to put a cop between like people and their conscience, and that's really messed up. And like if people can't be good Samaritans publicly, then they're gonna have to do it privately, because like letting people's consciences wither up and die like that is just messed up. That
That
alone,
was
I
actually that was actually Illich's point there. He emphasised that it was kind of leaving people's own ability to wither to dry up, because everything had been whatever you were supposed to be doing had been taken over by the authority system. So you know, um, sorry, I'll let you go on.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna go on that much longer, but yeah, like if people are walking around without like a conscience, that's just like basically the life of a robot. That's just not feasible. Like people should rebel against that.
Well, we're being asked to do that at the moment, making these selective decisions about sympathy for Ukrainians and not for, you know, lots of other people in lots of other places who are suffering as much and more. We have a very sacred national day in this country called Anzac Day, where they honour, mostly for the most part, it's in memory of people who were killed in World War One, especially in a rather unfortunate battle in Gallipoli.
I went into sermons from the early. I let myself.
What are we getting there? Oh, okay.
Sorry, I think it was just me because I posted a link. And I think it went on by mistake.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, fine. Okay, yeah. No, what I was saying was there was this particular National Day is so a journalist dared to say that, okay, well, on this day of remembering people who died in war, well, why not? Why can't we add in and remember these people and these people and these people who died in this war and this war and the other war? And it was astonishing. She was howled down to such an extent that she left Australia and went to live in the UK to get away from the stigma. That this sense of regard and what's the word, remembrance for people who died in the war was just very much limited to this narrow focus on just Australian and New Zealand soldiers. And you know that the media was it was just this sort of general outrage that anybody else should be included. You know, in a way, we're going through that again with Ukraine, and of course, with so many other things. It's kind of, and again, it comes back a little bit to what Illich was saying about the connection between the ethnic and the ethics. It was an interesting point. And I suppose, you know, the question is, in a very globalized world, you know, and the one you would think that we would be getting over the ethnic bit, but it's probably as bad as it's ever been. Sophie was telling me about a personal incident which demonstrates that somebody she knows, a victim of racial violence, you know. Anyway, I'll leave it at that just for a moment.
Yeah, unfortunately, racist nationalism is as strong as ever in the modern world. Yeah, especially in America.
I'm just wondering, do we want to? Anyone want to continue with this, or we
I wanted
looking
to
for?
say, Gary, thank you very much for bringing up that Good Samaritan analysis by Illich, because it's a very original one, and it's not at all the one that the Catholic Church usually preaches in church. And Illich has got this incredible take on all these things and he remained in the church actually all his life, even though he rebelled and he had problems with them, but he still plundered on and did his own thing all the way. Yeah, I'm thankful, because that opens an awful lot of possibilities, that conversation on the Samaritan. I think it's something I want to reflect on again. So sorry I made a bit of noise there, but I did post the link to Vimeo for a little short. Yeah, that's 7-8 minutes where he just extracted from his long talk where he talks about that. And I put a link to a very nice little book called Tools for Conviviality, because I believe that Illich was a man who really liked to be with other people. He liked to have dinners, meetings, and he thought that conviviality was the essence of human interactions, and you know, being yes, convivial, being welcoming, spending time exchanging with people. What we're doing now, just enjoying each other's company and conversing and having a nice meal. But that we can't do that online. Thank you, Gary, for bringing that up. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you mentioned conviviality that I'm just wondering how closely connected conviviality is, because Hugh spoke of what word did he use? Concordial. It was a very similar word. I just can't bring it to mind at the moment. But yeah, I'm just looking down a couple of things that I wrote about that Illich, and he used the term that what's happened is the institutionalization of neighborliness, and a little bit like you know how the state tends to annex everything. Something starts off being radical, and then in order to sort of control it, the state takes it over and codifies it and regulates it, and it then becomes, like part of the state's repertoire to institutionalize something that that was once on the outside, but it's at the same time as it does it, it blunts it, rounds it off, takes the life out of it. Takes it out of what Illich said. It's taking it out of people's individual responsibility, and so their sense of it atrophies. Just looking here to see if there's anything.
In my lifetime, I have seen this happening to childminding, because when I've seen it happening because there was an untold, unregulated way of minding children in the environments where I lived, where if the mother was busy at something in the garden, working or doing something outside, there was always either a neighbor or a grandmother, and it would take the kids, and the kids were not in one belonging to one house. Every house was their house. There was, of course, maybe when I was young, women didn't work as much, but that's not I don't know is that good or not, but you know what we think about work. But the way is that things were without any money exchanged. It was a mutual aid between women thing. Another mutual aid thing that existed, and you can see that in America today with the shortage in babies' formula. Is that not a long time ago.
Oh my God, that was outrageous.
Yeah, but
sorry for
interrupting. Yeah, I've seen what happened. Yes, go ahead, sorry.
But the thing is, you when Russell Brand, I don't know if you saw Russell Brand's rant about the baby formula incident. Russell's usually pretty good at covering the various different aspects of this, but I was astonished that he got through a 10 or 15-minute rant covering an enormous amount of information and different perspectives on it. And at the end of it, he didn't explain why there was apparently a shortage of boobs, which kind of got me, like this, and I thought, oh my.
That's what I was going to say, because I've seen breastfeeding not promoted, normal thing when I was young, I mean, 60s, 70s, but already Nestle and the big companies of milk had already crept into the maternities trying to push midwives and doctors to tell the women that, if you have a little difficulty breastfeeding, just give a bottle, it's easier. It was just, that sort of way, a lot. But I remember that's, we had in the countryside what we call wet nurses, which means that when a woman couldn't breastfeed for some reason, if she was just sick, tired, she didn't have milk or whatever, it can happen, there was somebody in the neighborhood that always had enough milk for her baby. So you used to lend your baby for fees, or a woman would come and live in your house or come with her baby and she'd feed the two, or there was sort of things like that were also unorganized between women, with no money involved. It was part of a normal, household. And if you mention a wet nurse or breastfeeding to certain people at the moment in response to the formula shortage, you're going to get lit alive, because it doesn't seem like it even enters the mentality of people that they could be without baby formula, but they might be without it. And what are they going to do then? If a woman doesn't want to breastfeed or has no milk and she doesn't want to look around her to find somebody to feed her baby, is she going to let her baby die or what? You know, it's just like, what the hell? But I didn't listen to that Russell Brand thing. Gary, can you expand on what he was saying?
Oh, no, it wasn't so much what he said, it was what he didn't say. That my astonishment was that he got through the entire discussion about the reasons behind this shortage of baby formula without at all even mentioning the fact that this isn't how babies are meant to be fed, or that there's any alternative that people could be turning to. Or it was just nothing at all. It was just completely taken for granted that no formula meant no food for babies, and that was the end of the story. And so this was a completely insurmountable catastrophe. And it was just the omission, right? It wasn't what he said; it was what he didn't say that got me going. You know.
Oh yeah, because no, it's the elephant in the room. It's like, you know, it's the big thin out of thin air, this formula thing. Like, okay, there's no more formula, so yeah, go back to nature. Like, there's no more vegetables, you grow your own. There's no more, I don't know, there's no more fish in the shop. You go and set a net or get a fishing rod and go to the lake. And this type of I know urban people, I might be a little bit, but you know, there's always ways around. But nobody is talking about the breastfeeding and that. No one. It's gone completely out the door. Like, if it was not something, it's something or some extremists do and some people do. There is certain countries where there's a bigger uptake, and actually it's usually the wealthy countries now that are on the rise of breastfeeding, and most of the countries like sub-Saharan Africa, South America, who are especially in deprived environments, are actually relying on baby formula. So in terms, they've wiped out breastfeeding knowingly from those countries because they knew they had a huge market because of the high birth rate there. And you know, so I've seen in 1980 the program of Nestle and SMA for propagating their formula in I can't remember the country. Was it Congo? Or I was reading a thing anyway about it. And what they were doing is that they were going around distributing free boxes of formula to women, and saying, well, and to mothers, and saying, well, listen, try this, it's much better, it's modern, it comes from the West, more sort of, you know, promoting language type of thing. And within a year, there was an enormous amount of babies' death from diarrhea, because they didn't teach properly how to, that you know, when you use formula, you have to sterilize bottles, use a sterile water, because you reconstitute milk from powder. And you know, if you're especially if you're in a country like very hot, you can propagate an awful lot of diseases. By breastfeeding, you don't have to do all that. It's all naturally, you know, from breast to mouth. So there was a terrible death rate because of lack of information on the risks of dehydration by diarrhea. And then within, probably they say within 5-10 years, they had nearly wiped out breastfeeding in certain villages, because it's a skill. I mean, it's a skill that you learn from women. If a woman sees her mother breastfeeding her little brother or sister, or if a neighbor, a young woman or a teenager sees, you know, it's a kind of a thing that just is propagated without any teaching. But if that disappears, and you see your elders filling a bottle and feeding a baby, well, you eradicate that practice completely from the community. So it was a sign for a lot of women that you were more westernized if you were giving a bottle, that it was more the thing to do, you know, and it's sort of was wiped out in lots of places. And even though there's still an awful lot of women in Africa who are breastfeeding their children, I mean, I'm saying it's still quite high. There has been some areas and some places in India and some places in other countries that have been entirely wiped out. And I don't know, is it on the comeback? I haven't read anything about that, but that's what they did.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. The Yeah, actually, you reminded me. I remember when my nephew was born, and my sister actually had to go to classes at the hospital to teach how to successfully breastfeed the baby. And I thought it was rather strange. So I hadn't really thought about it before, but it just goes back to what you're saying about the loss of that natural example of not just doing it, but how it's done as well. Um, so
Yeah,
there's
then
there's some.
there's classes now to how to eat, how to have sex, how to breathe. It's just like how to walk. I know some women who are
Yeah.
bring their kids to special classes there's a way of to improve the way of I mean, completely cutting out all instinct, all learning from community, from example, from elders. It's unreal. Yeah, breastfeeding is now a thing. Well, you're going to breastfeed. Oh my God! Instead of when I was young, it's oh, you're going to give a bottle. Oh my God, no, I can't breastfeed. What am I going to do? You see, it's completely turned around. It's unreal.
Yeah,
Totally unreal.
that kind of reminds me of a tangent that guy went on in that 8 circuit model video where he talked about how people are starting to detach from their bodies, like in that movie Wall-E. Like the alien cortex is like trying to eject out of the body and not have to deal with all that gross biology it perceives as, um, dirty. Yeah, that's not good. That's not healthy. We're
Well, thank
animals,
you.
like yeah, we're animals. All other mammals on this planet breastfeed. So
Thank you for posting those talks. I haven't listened to all of them. I've listened to three first ones. It's really interesting, that guy. And I really loved Wall-E. I mean, I'm still showing it to my grandchildren. And I think that was a vision. Of course, it's science fiction, vision of the future. But there's a message in there that's absolutely right. And, remember the obese people who can't walk anymore? And people have become so used to their chairs that they get enormous and they don't move. There's a lot in that little movie.
yeah, I liked it because it's sort of like the tricking of Kronos. So using Kronos' own technology against him to get humans back to Earth. Yeah.
But that even came out in a post. I think on Reddit today about the space junk. I think Bob made a comment that well, that's all right. It will stop us from leaving Earth. The thing is, we don't really need to anyway. But Derek Jensen touched on that I don't know who posted the little talk by Derek Jensen about the street gangs, boys in street gangs
Oh
in
yeah, I
America.
posted that one.
You
Yeah.
post well. That seems to be related, because the critical point in that little talk was where he said, "Well, all teenagers want to die, but they don't want to actually die. What it means is that it's a transformation that they want to undergo, but they don't realise the true nature of that. So you get all these perverted forms, distorted forms of transformation. Uh, uh, but I mean, I mean, there's a parallel with the Wally or Wall-E, whatever you want to call it, as well, because these people had transformed themselves into these, what they thought was a very sophisticated and evolved form of humanity, but it was a mistransformation in which they had actually become less than what they were rather than something more. And I just think I could tie together a little bit of Illich in that again too. And he made the comment uh, again. It's this theme of handing over our either responsibility or our personal transformation to something less when we think we're doing the right thing, but we're actually not. We're diminishing ourselves in the process of that. And he said, the sin is missing the personal facing of one another. For its perversion is a vast architecture of impersonal institutions. And he was referring to things like the social security systems, healthcare systems, all this kind of thing, where an institution was taking over, a kind of a faceless institution was taking over the care of human beings for one another, and therefore removing the what's the word, validity, it's taking the vitality out of people helping each other for themselves. And it probably also comes back to the baby formula thing as well, where, we're handing over something that should be a source of human contact and development, and sort of handing it over to a container from a pharmaceutical company, and they now are the intermediaries between the mother and the child, and kind of severing the personal connection. I guess the severance of the personal connection and reduction of your own sort of diminishment of humanity is the theme that runs through all of it.
Well, it's the danger of the exception becoming the rule in the domain of breastfeeding. You see, all through history, there's been supplements for women who were mothers who died, or because a lot of mothers died in childbirth. So if you didn't have a wet nurse, sometimes you used a goat or a cow's milk, and there was some archaeologists have found some old bottles for babies. But they were an exception. But when the market saw an opportunity to dehydrate milk and sell it, there was such a market for that the exception became the rule. That's another, that's what I'm seeing. I think about the introduction of formula. And what came to mind when you said the phrase that all teenagers want to die, it's something that's extremely important and denied. And we have often talked in our conversations about teenagers missing initiation and missing the journey to face death and to accept death. And that missed initiation is what's causing the self-harm epidemic, the suicide epidemic, the drug epidemic, the violence epidemic in more and more young people. It's not just the sickness of our society, which is in a circular way back into this cycle. But it is this need to die, this wanting to die that is not addressed. It's addressed in the wrong way by all the institutions saying, oh my God, there's an epidemic of suicide. Young people want to die. Yes, they want to die. Yeah, yes, they want to die, or they want to face their death. They want to see what is death. They want to play with death. They want to, and yes, the rituals are not performed anymore. The rituals of contact with nature, physical contact with nature, danger, pain, cold, heat, encounters with animals or fish, and all this is taken out of the equation at the crucial age and carried on then into adulthood with a huge void that is filled by alcohol, gambling, and whatever, and work and allegiance to false powers. But yes, Gary, all teenagers want to die, and it's a good thing. I would say it's a good thing.
It's a sense of starvation of authentic experience. They're going. You can see. Well, I suppose that shooting was probably one example where, in order to get a sufficiently compelling experience, the person has to go to some frightful extreme. Whereas in a more sane society, you would have you would have more less alienated experiences, and so they would have more power, and you wouldn't need to go to such frightful extremes in order to feel as though you are alive, or that you mattered, or this kind of thing. I was going to make another point. It's just kind of lost out of my brain at the moment.
But you know, the piercings and the tattoos are coming at a younger and younger age. You know, all sorts of things like that are I don't know. Is it a collective unconscious, or is it something?
Well, let's see. They're probably substitutes for an authentic experience. Yeah, I've got back what I wanted to say, which was connected up with I think another post that was put up about attention ADHD, and maybe it wasn't a post. I might have read it somewhere else, but I'll just go into it briefly. And one of the things there that came out of that was that the person who was writing the article was sort of trying to develop the line that actually, excuse me, that actually the person with ADHD is probably technological industrial society's nemesis. That these people are kind of have appeared as a bit of a pushback because they just won't be motivated by anything that isn't intrinsically worthwhile doing. And so they had this sort of they just absolutely wouldn't be satisfied or motivated in any way by anything that wasn't that didn't really interest them vitally and have some sufficient validity, because it seems to be the disease of the society we're in, that most of the things that most people do all the time are completely not connected. They're just alien things. They're tasks that they do which aren't directly related to their survival. They're just so repetitive, unrelated things. And, that's another sense in which we become disconnected. And so we look at these people, ADHD people, and think there's something wrong. But in fact, again, the tendency is that we interpret things the wrong way around instead of taking a lesson from it. And saying, yeah, hey, all right, so if you've got ADHD, you might legitimately still have an issue, but there's a lesson that can be learned from this in terms of most of the people doing things that just bore them to death, that they're not motivated by it, or really wasting their lives away on this kind of thing. And I guess that could be connected back to what we're just talking about with the young people wanting to die. And go on, sorry, if you've got a point, I'll
Yeah,
share.
I mean, I was just gonna make a personal point. I related that to that a lot because, like, in elementary school, and still today, I see visions and animal spirits and stuff. And in elementary school, I got in a lot of trouble for going around telling people about that. They put me in counseling and stuff. And so then I learned that, yeah, the authorities are going to destroy me if I go talking about this stuff. So I started drawing. I almost didn't make it through school, through high school and middle school, because I didn't want to do math or read these boring textbooks. So yeah, I was like a D and C minus student, barely made it through school because focusing on all that boring shit is unbearable.
And so many are like you, DB, and they only manage to operate through stealth, hiding, pretending, and sometimes at the cost of a lot of their happiness. And also, Gary, that article that you referred to is very interesting, saying that people with ADHD are against the clock too. isn't it? It's just amazing how they just how it's that.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is like the clock isn't necessary. Like I I do things when I feel like it, and to normies that sounds bad, but all my responsibilities get done. They just don't get done by the clock.
Yeah, they all. I'm just trying to find a reference to that article. I'm not sure that it was a Reddit post or something else that I read. But yeah, they also went into that issue of what you just said about, the doing everything by the clock as well was also a definite non-starter for ADHD people. And I know what you mean about the school experience. A friend of mine who's an artist who had very much the same experience at school. And had to develop all these sort of strategies for slipping through without letting them traumatize him or try to change him too much. But as Sophie was just saying, it did leave him with permanent, I don't know what you would call it. Well, I mean, problems in terms of the fact that the adaptations he made to survive school didn't didn't serve him very well once he left school. You know, but he kind of got stuck with them for the rest of his life. So the damage is done one way or the other.
Yeah, it's like it's a broken heart, like that at least that's my experience of it. But I think one of the reasons why I didn't end up with too bad of, habits and pathologies is because, like, even when I was a child, I was already like identifying with animals. So I was like trying to think how a wolf would think. Like, how do I skirt these humans trying to destroy me?
Yeah, I mean that's great to have hit upon a strategy. Because I mean you probably observed yourself other people who might have been in similar situations who didn't find something that could help them through, uh, and they could end up being processed by the system and really messed up, or completely, um, just not being able to function properly at all.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. They screw you up. They try to guide your identification process in a bad way, try to make you into a
Mm.
robot. Um, yeah, I don't know. All I know is it messes people up. I can't really talk on their traumatized experience of it, but yeah, school is hell. That's all I got to say about that.
It's very interesting. There's a term in the article that says that at the heart of ADD is a blindness to time. As I like that term because it's a blindness to time, but is that a defect or is that an original state? The blindness to time, because if you look at animals, for example, because you're talking about them, DB, they possess that blindness to time. They've got the cycles of the day and the year and built into their instinct, but they have this blindness to time. There's time for feed, there's time for walk, there's time for sleep, play, but they I like that term. And
Yeah,
yeah,
the animals are pure Kairos time, like pure Kairos all the time. There's like I can't think of an example of them using chronological time at all. I think it's just pure in the moment, doing as they feel is necessary to survive and have fun, depending on what kind of species they are. Yeah, there's none of this clockwork, mechanized, um, artificial top-down stuff going on, it seems, out there. And that's another thing, is like a couple of friends of mine were talking about like cells as machines. I'm like, no, biological processes that are not machines. You can't see them that way. That's totally incorrect. There's no chronological, predictable programming going on at all levels in biology. That's not, no, there's spontaneity in there, that machines don't have.
That's why Hugh was saying, and he didn't like the word hope, but he liked to use the fact that there was a glimmer of hope in the fact that there was such an unpredictability in especially in the right brain of the human being, and that couldn't be taken into account by the machine ever, this unpredictability. And yes, the animals are in the now. They're totally in the present, in the kairos. They're in the now. Yeah, definitely. Mm.
Just was one point I wanted to insert a little bit earlier regarding the Derek Jensen thing about their teenage death wish and the gang behaviour, and was that one of the other sins of the modern world is separating the generations. So